Um, so I abandoned my last fortress in this world. I had a bug where I had angered my civilization at sort of the exact same time that I got a monarch come live with me. So I was like simultaneously at war and also peaceful with my home civilization. So uh, yeah, that was unfortunate. I didn't really know what I was doing with the raids and things like that. I'd never done that in the versions that I'd played before. So now I know. But anyway, I mentioned that because I've already generated a world, which if you've started, you've already generated the world here. Um, I'm not going to go through the parameters for generating the world. There's quite a few different things that you can configure in there, but I just left all the defaults, and for the purposes of this, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to start a new game in the existing world that I have here. The interesting thing is, I think I noticed that it's starting from the year 109. I think I'd started year 100 originally because when I generated, I did like 100 years of history, um, and I played for 9 years in game. So I'm pretty sure that I retired my fortress. It should still actually be there, and so I could technically like interact with my own site in this game if I wanted to. All right. Um, so yeah, I embarked here before. You can see here's my last fortress. What does it have to say about this? Doesn't have much to say. Okay. So the thing to know, instead of just like, I mean, there's just so much here. It's a huge map, even with the default settings. Clicking around arbitrarily is you're unlikely to find what you're looking for unless you just don't care if you want to play it randomly. But if you're new, you definitely don't want to do that, especially. So, I mean, I would say you don't want to do it at all because I think unless you have access to certain things, I just don't really find the game that interesting. Like it can be challenging but uninteresting, I guess. I don't know. Others might disagree. Uh, so you can use the Find Embark location feature here. Is the main thing that you want. Uh, I think this time, so it starts with a 4x4. Um, One of the issues that I ran into with my last fort is just FPS issues running in the late game. Once I got like over 150 dwarves or whatever. This has kind of always been the case for me with Dwarf Fortress. It's just a thing. There are a lot of different ways that you can play to avoid having those issues until later, but they kind of always creep up on you unless you're really actively trying to prevent it. One thing that you can do uh, is just lower this amount. This is a pretty huge space. Last time I did my fortress on a 3x3, I think I'm actually gonna go for a 2x2 on this one for a pretty compact thing. You could honestly even do a 1x1. The main downside of going low, I guess, is you're going to have I suppose like less trees on the surface, that you can chop down. Like I'm trying to think, but that's going to be the main downside. As far as expansion of your base, you can always dig down further. Um, so I'm tempted to even do a 1x1 and kind of do like a mini fort thing, but I don't know. Maybe let's do a 2x2. I did three by three last time, so I'll do that. Okay, so I'm going with that. I recommend 3x3 or below personally. Uh, Now, if you're starting out, I would definitely recommend some of the most important options. You want calm here. Last time I did Untamed Wilds, which is the harshest, and I was just constantly assaulted by like death birds, which were incredibly annoying because I had a hard time getting my ranged military set up as well. And even with them, I kind of, at the very end of my last fortress, had some success with defense by creating like towers with fortifications around the front of my base, which made it a little bit better. And I just had the military that had crossbows up there constantly. But even then, if you want your dwarfs going out and getting wood that's chopped down and other things from outside, which you can prevent, but that has downsides. I mean, obviously you're not going to be able to get anything from the surface. And if you want your regular dwarfs going out and doing that, it's just a pain in the ass to have these flying enemies all over the map all the time. Ground enemies wouldn't have been so bad. You can send your military specifically at them to kill them, but since they can't path to, tons of Z levels into the sky, like it's just really tough unless you have them constantly defending key locations, which just takes forever to set up. So, anyway, a lot to say. Basically, just calm. Wilderness probably isn't that bad, but I think that's important. Uh, you definitely don't want to go with an evil site. You'd probably be okay with normal or good. Obviously, good is better and easier. I'm going to stick with good for now and see what I get. You can obviously run this multiple times depending on, if you make a very, very ideal find embark location set up here. There, you always run the risk that you run it and you don't find anything, but the only downside there is the time to run it. So you might as well make it as ideal as possible for what you want and see what you get. And then you can cut back some of these things if you just don't find anything. Maybe I'll run one at first that I don't think will succeed so you can see. Elevation, I don't really care. I'm just going to leave this not applicable. I'm trying to think for each one of these, like why I would do one thing versus the other. I suppose, I mean, honestly, I don't even really want to speak on it. I don't really know. I don't care that much. Temperature, I'm definitely going to do medium. If it gets too hot or too cold, you can have a variety of issues. So I'll leave that at medium for an ideal loadout site. Rain, your dwarves and creatures and things like that kind of hate being in the rain, but it's not that big of an issue. If you're really worried about people going into tantrum spirals and things like that, and you're concerned that you might not be able to get your dwarves happy for too long, you can do a low amount of rain here, but I'm just gonna do not applicable and see what I find. I don't really care too much. Drainage, I'm not too sure what drainage is. Yeah, I'm not too sure on that. I'm gonna leave that one in A. I don't really care. Fluxstone layer, I find this to be important. I believe that is the Fluxstone is going to give you basically like stones that can be used in more interesting purposes than just crafting stone. So I want to say, like, in some of the metal industry, you're going to need this. It's obviously better to have it than not. Aquifers are kind of a big one. I'm going to go for no on both of these. My understanding of how these work is basically like layers, light and heavy is like different amounts of layers of water that are kind of like underneath the soil. So like if you want to dig really deep for your fortress, you might just run into a full like Z layer of water or multiple Z layers of water, which is there's ways of dealing with that, but it's extremely advanced. to be able to get through that, and annoying to do it. So definitely the ideal is to not have either of those. A river, however, you definitely want. I mean, the access to just infinitely flowing water is insanely important. Um, Now, you might get like a saltwater river, which is what I had in my last Embark fortress, rather than freshwater, which is a little bit more of a pain because you're going to have to desalinate some of that in order to be have it be used easily by your dwarves for things without getting sick or making things worse. But I did that in my last game, even kind of an advanced setup for it pretty early on, and it wasn't too bad. Personally, I actually think like doing a little bit of irrigation with a floodgate or something like that, even if you're new to the game, is kind of a cool and fun like project to work on. So even if you do have fresh water, making a moat or something like that, I find to be kind of interesting. Um, so definitely want a river. Yeah, I can't imagine what a pain in the ass it would be without one. Soil. Oh, shoot! Did I screw everything up? No. Okay, just closed it. So I don't really want deep soil. Like the benefit of a soil layer is going to be mainly that you can just start farming on the soil immediately. So you dig down. It also mines much quicker. You can when you first embark, you can like build a big thing a couple, one or two layers down, and it's going to go really fast because it's like a soil layer. You could set up your farms and start farming immediately. It's not the best place to farm. The soil is not as good as the irrigated rock layers for subterranean farming. But I did that in my last fortress and ran it for a long time with success. The downside to the soil layers is you're not generating any boulders to use or anything like that. But you could just dig down further for it. So I think it's good to have. Now, whether you want deep, some, or little, for now, I'm gonna leave this in A and just see what I find and look through the different Embark sites that I find. I think I would definitely prefer little. I don't want like super deep soil. So I could leave this here now. Maybe I will do that, I guess, just because I'm going for as ideal as possible. But again, you can just dig down a little bit further, so it's not the biggest deal in the world. Okay, I'm reading a message now. I tried light aquifer. It wasn't full of water, but several layers had water seeping out of the walls. I was game to figure out how to handle it, but I couldn't figure out how to turn off the thing where it cancels mining when... yes. Okay, yeah, so maybe it's not like full layers, but just like water throughout. Yeah, that would just be insanely annoying. I mean, I guess it depends on what kind of player you are, but for me, like, I really like an aesthetic layout, and again, trying to battle FPS issues that are happening later on. Your fortress design is a big part of that, so having to do complicated things where you're like building around this stuff would just be annoying. I think make your base look like Swiss cheese probably, without like a bunch of complicated pumping and things like that. So yeah, don't go for it. Clay layer, absolutely. I want this, and sand. I talked a little bit about this in the last video, but basically both clay and sand are just, if you have any amount of it, it's like an infinitely farmable source of materials that can be used for interesting applications. And would be very annoying to have to like import through trading or something like that in the quantities that you probably want them. So sand is going to be your glass industry, and clay is going to be earthenware essentially. So I mean, if you can get it, you definitely want both of those, is all I'll say. It's just more crafts that you can make and more interesting furniture and constructions and things like that. So Going to go for both of those. All right, then you're going to get to basically the rest of these are just all of the different kinds of metallic ore that you're going to be able to find. Um, I mean, the ideal is just yes on everything, right? Like, you want to be able to find as much of this as possible because it means that you don't have to, again, import it is like the main way. Trade it or, go out and get it some other way through raiding or something like that. So the ideal is going to be all of them. I think it's unlikely that I'm going to find a site that has all of these. Uh, you know, I won't really go through all of them, but really the important one here, like if you're being realistic, is iron. Is just like the single most important one. You want to be able to make iron and steel equipment, basically, and it's also valuable as like even if you don't find precious metals like gold and silver and things like that, steel is also pretty valuable. So like if you're just talking about making statues or constructions to make rooms fancy and make nobles happy and things like that, you could be stuck without any of these precious metals and still make like super valuable stuff out of steel. So yeah, iron is what you want. The rest of these are nice to haves. Obviously, like the more valuable ones are nicer. Platinum, gold. You can look on the wiki just to see a quick table for like what the most valuable ones are and what alloys can be made out of certain combinations if you want to get fancy. But yeah, we'll just run a test first and see if we can find all of them. I doubt we will. So let's go ahead and run this now and see what we come up with. It does take a while to go over the whole map. You can kind of watch it scanning. Yeah, I think in this thing you're going to see some greens if it finds a location. Some of these look like they already have settlements on them in these locations that it's finding, so let's just see what happens. And I'll also kind of give you a loadout here of like partial matches that it's finding. Yeah, like bismuth is going to be a rarity. Aluminum. Good spirit. I guess a lot of this is probably just like normal spirit. So, the things that it's not finding very often are good things to basically, yeah, so it's just partial match. So I didn't find a single site on the entire map that has everything. These ones that are marked out are probably very good ones to just get rid of and just say like we don't care if you find those. Spirit, we'll run it again with normal, but we could probably do not applicable and just see what we get, but let's just run it again with normal, and let's try that again, see what happens. I feel like this still might be a partial match. So obviously, like, I didn't go over world generation, but one benefit of doing a smaller world is this will go faster. But you also have less, possibilities for what it can find too. So. All right, so it's saying match found. Now, in the text version, I want to say that there was a way to just cycle through all the different matches, which I personally really liked. I'm still new to this version, obviously, it's not that new. But I couldn't find a way to do that, and so I hope there's a way still, or they make a way, but I was left to kind of eyeball it, and I'm colorblind, so it's not too easy for me. But I had certain spots that were highlighted. These red spots, I guess I can't embark on at all. Yes, south of the desert, here. So I see an immediate problem with this already, which is that there's no trees. Yeah, That is a definite problem. Like that, and this used to be one of the things. I feel like there were actually more options on the find results in the text version. I certainly remember being able to set how many trees I wanted and always going for denser trees. I personally like a lot. I said this also in my last video. Like you can get by without a bunch of wood, and you can also import wood, but it's just very annoying to do it. So I really want to find something that has more trees, so I'm probably going to have to relax these options some more. I'm not seeing anything else here, I'm especially looking at like these forested regions. Obviously you could see in my last fortress here I chose one of these heavily forested regions. I also happen to know from playing this map before now that like the main kind of dwarven settlements seem to be over here, although there might be some over here as well. Which doesn't really matter that much, but okay, so yeah, I'm gonna relax some of these. Let's go for get rid of the savagery and just see what we find. Let's get rid of the spirit and see what we find. I definitely don't want an evil location, but let's just see. And let's say I don't care about what the soil situation is. I definitely want all this stuff. Okay, so let's get into the metals a little bit. So, like I said, you definitely want iron. I'm not going to take that away. Copper, frankly, I don't really care. I mean, it's a decent alternative, I guess. In my last game, I had... It's way more... it's, like, more common, I guess. So if you do have copper, like, you just end up with a lot more metal. Benefit of which, I guess you could say, like, you can use your crappier metal to, like, train up your metalsmiths. But at the end of the day, like, I was mostly using copper for things that I just didn't want to use my iron for because I didn't care, like if it's not equipment or if it's not decorative. But it needs to be metal. Like, okay, copper's fine, but you know, I can do without it. Silver's kind of the same way. Like, it's valuable, but it's nowhere near as valuable as gold or platinum. So like, I'm okay with not having it. I would really like both gold and platinum if I can have it. That would be sweet. Those are really good for like when you want to make you know, rooms really nice in a small amount of space. Just throw a couple gold or platinum statues in there. Nickel, don't really care. Zinc, don't really care. Some of these, like, they're good for making alloys, which, you know, can basically, you can combine different metal ores and bars in order to create alloys that oftentimes are a little bit better than the sum of their parts. But, you know, you're still not getting as good as like iron, gold, and platinum for the most part. So I don't really care too much. Same thing with like bronze, you know, using tin and stuff like that. So I don't really care that much about that. Lead was another one I was using kind of just for stuff I needed in metal that I didn't want to use for other things. Don't really care too much. And I've already turned off aluminum and bismuth. So let's try that and see what we get. It's a cool little island right here. Too bad it doesn't have what I want. Alright, so we got a little bit more to work with here. I know this is like right in the goblin zone here. What are we dealing with here? These are heavily forested. Cold weather is not too bad. Cold and like hot, I think are fine. You really just don't want like scorching, you know, extreme temperatures or freezing or whatever. This would be very interesting because it's like right next to a bunch of goblin stuff. I'm like neighboring these goblin pits, which would be very fun once I get set up, but maybe not so fun in the early game. Although I don't know if they would raid you right away. I'm not sure how that works. These could be fun ones. They look pretty good. Goblins nearest site here. That's definitely a possibility. What are we doing here? Oh, it's very deep soil, which is a little bit unfortunate. Again, not the end of the world, but I would prefer to only have a little bit. This one's not as bad, and it's a little bit further away from the goblins. Definite candidate. Let's see what else there is. These ones are closer to the dwarven areas, but no trees. Sparse trees. I don't want that. Oh, these are good woodland areas here. Clay, deep soil. Platinum, lead, light aquifer. Okay, what do we got here? Yeah, this is definitely a little bit safer from the goblins. Woodland. Oh, this is fresh water too, I think. That is not bad. In addition to the metals that I chose, I'm getting like nickel here, and zinc, and lead, and copper. Yeah, those are pretty good. What else we got down here? Fresh water. Definitely surrounded by a lot of stuff here. My last fortress, I was like far away from everything. All right. I mean, I could honestly embark on any one of these. I think it would be good. I'm just kind of taking a look around. And I mean, honestly, if you kind of know what you're doing, you know, your first few times that you play, you might just die to things that you don't see coming, but there's a good likelihood. Like, I played my last fort for many hours, so you can be here for a long time. Like, it makes total sense to spend some time here, and make sure you get something that you want. These are both deep soil. Okay. Let's see what else we got. Of course, like where I embarked last time, you know, you could see I made a very similar search, which is how I ended up here to begin with. But I don't think I want to go in the same place I was last time. I'm thinking I'm gonna do something a little bit closer to that dwarf settlement where I was looking for. Here's where I did my very first fortress on this map, in this haunted forest, which was just an absolute nightmare. I don't recommend that. Lots of trees though. Yeah, I'm almost curious to do the more dangerous one there, but oh, we got a freezing around here. It's like a little pocket of just cold. Again, very deep soil. A lot of these have very deep soil. I wonder if something I chose, some combination of what I chose, is kind of erring toward that. Maybe some combination of metals or something. woodland. What was this other one? Heavily forested. This is going to give me more trees, and it might be a little bit more interesting right next to the goblins here. Alright, let's do it. So we'll choose here. Got a river on top, which is okay. I like to, it doesn't matter that much, but when I choose the Embark location, and if you were doing something as small as a 1x1, obviously you wouldn't have a choice, but in this case where you've got kind of a bigger square, I do like to have the river be as close to like the corner or the top as possible. So like ideal would be like it just goes through one little tiny corner or something. Simply because it gives you a bigger space when you dig down, to dig on your first few levels. I mean, that's really it. You can kind of make your fortress closer to the middle of the map and do that. It's not a big deal, but I like that. So I'm gonna go Embark, and I'm gonna go down to a 2x2. And I think I'm gonna go right here.